My contractions are consistently 3 minutes apart, lasting about 50 seconds, and it's been an hour, so it's time.
Hi guys! So, we had a baby!
Yeah, we are parents.
Which is so crazy. Like, I do not think of us as parents or me as a mom and Luca as a dad. Do you?
Well, it's pretty real. Last 2 weeks, she's 2 weeks today.
Yeah.
She's sleeping right now.
Sleeping
We don't know for how long, but she's sleeping. And well, it's been quite a lot of sleepless nights. So
Yeah.
I do feel a little bit of a dad.
That's true. I would say we feel like parents just in the sleep kind of aspect of things, but we wanted to share our birth story. It did not go as planned. If you don't know already, my plan for the birth was, okay, hold on. I want to say, I never had a plan. Like, I never said, like, this is exactly how I want it to go and it has to go like this. It was not like that at all. We did do Bradley classes, which is a birthing method, and they had us create a birth plan, but really the best way to describe it was more so like birth preferences or something like that.
Because like our wish list.
A wish list, yes, because like if I were to have a perfect birth, this is how it would go.
Right.
But for me, what I loved about the classes so much and preparing that birth plan is that I learned about so many of the different possibilities and different things that can happen in a birth. And that was the value in creating a birth plan for me, was just the education standpoint of it, learning how to advocate for myself in case things started kind of deviating from that plan, which it did. Yeah, it did. So I guess I'll just start by saying I went into labor on Monday morning at like 2 in the morning. So it was like Sunday night, Monday morning.
Even though the day before you were having some cramps, right? Very mild cramps.
I remember having more frequent Braxton Hicks.
Braxton Hicks, that's right.
Which, if you don't know what Braxton Hicks are, it's just kind of like a tightening of your stomach. You don't feel like cramps usually, but these ones started to kind of turn into kind of mini cramps, I guess you could say, and I thought that was interesting. So went to bed Sunday night at midnight, woke up at 2 in the morning on Monday.
August 10th.
August 10th. And this kind of sets the rest of the day because I only got 2 hours of sleep, and in the Bradley classes, our instructor, who was also my doula, so she was gonna attend the birth, she said, like, you don't ever wanna go into labor on no sleep and on an empty stomach, because usually once you get to the hospital and they check you in, they don't let you eat. I believe the reason why is because if you do need to go into an emergency C-section, that is surgery, they need you to have an empty stomach, I believe, right?
I think so, yeah.
You guys can correct me if that's wrong. So 2 hours of sleep, I was having contractions and I started timing them. And the point at which you're supposed to go to the hospital is, they call it 511. So you've been having contractions 5 minutes apart. They've lasted 1 minute consecutively for 1 hour. And that's the point where it's like, okay, things are moving along, you need to head to the hospital. And my contractions right from the get-go were 45 seconds long, so almost at that minute mark, 3 minutes apart, so less than that 5 minutes. It was like 3 to 5, sometimes 3 to 5, it was 3. And it had been 30 minutes consecutively, and that's when we were like, okay, let's call the hospital because we're already on trend to have these contractions, you know, for an hour consistently. But the kicker is that I thought my water broke. It didn't, spoiler alert, but you guys, like, when I got to the hospital and they told me, like, no, your water didn't break out, and they were like, are you sure it wasn't pee? Guys, I know what pee is, what it looks like I know the difference. It wasn't pee.
And that's the reason why also we went to the hospital.
Yeah, well,
because our plan was to labor at home for as long as possible.
That was always the plan, was, okay, once the contractions start, stay at home as long as possible to not get that like clock at the hospital ticking, because usually when you get close to the 24-hour mark, they're like, okay, you know, we need to kind of get things moving along.
And also because it's more comfortable at home.
Oh, for sure, more comfortable, yeah. When we called the hospital, we said, okay, these are my contractions, they're lasting this long, this, you know, long apart, and my water broke. And they were like, okay, yes, you need to come in. So we get to the hospital. Oh, Luca actually, before that, Luca had me eat something. Because he was like, okay, if you're going to the hospital, it's 2 a.m, you need to eat something. So I had Greek yogurt.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it,
little Greek
just a
yogurt,
little
yeah.
thing of Greek yogurt.
I fed rigatoni.
He did, he fed him at 2 a.m.
Yeah, otherwise, I know we were gonna be at the hospital for a while.
Right,
so.
yeah. On the way to the hospital, guys, the contractions were so painful that Luca driving, it was unbearable. I had to have him pull over so that I could go through the contraction without the car moving. It was really, really bad.
I was active labor for sure.
Yeah, Luca paid really close attention in the Bradley classes. I get to the hospital and they check me in. They didn't have a room ready for me, so they put me in another type of room. And that's where they checked and confirmed my water did not break. They checked to see how dilated I was, and I was 4 centimeters, which is not a lot. For those of you that don't know, you have to get to 10 centimeters. That's when baby's ready, when you're ready to push. So 4 centimeters is not a lot. Typically, they tell you that you should go to the hospital when you're 6 centimeters dilated, okay?
Right.
So when I heard that, I was like, that sucks. My water didn't break and I'm only 4 centimeters. I feel like I'm really early, but we're here.
Exactly. I don't know if you remember, but I asked you, do you want to go back home? Because you are not 6 centimeters. We can go back home and do, you know, labor at home and then come back here. But
my concern was that from what we were told, that like people that start having contractions really quickly and like really close together, since mine were 3 to 5 minutes apart, that those labors can go quick. And so I didn't want to risk going home and having
the stress of like,
the
you
stress
know,
of back
leaving
and
back and forth, the car ride,
yeah, the car ride, the contractions in the car ride were not fun. So we stayed. So in that room,
and it was 3 in the morning.
3 in the morning by the time I got checked in and everything, yeah. So in that room, the like kind of pre-labor room, I started, which happened first? The shakes or the nausea?
The nausea.
I started throwing up everywhere. And I threw up the Greek yogurt that I ate.
And more, I think, because there was a lot.
And I was throwing up, and that's not fun when you're in labor. And then I started having the shakes and like uncontrollable. It was crazy. I went through this for about 7 hours until they checked me again to see how dilated I was.
They actually gave you a nausea medication.
Well, that was after. That was way after because
No, it was in the pre-labor room.
I don't remember.
It was in the pre-labor room, yes.
I don't remember.
It was.
Luca honestly is gonna have like a better memory of some of this than me. So, okay, well, eventually at some point they did give me anti-nausea medication. It didn't work because they gave me bone broth, so something liquid but something that has some, you know, nutrients, and I threw up the bone broth, so I just couldn't keep anything down. They checked me again, and at this point, guys, it had been 7 hours of contractions, of a lot of pain, because this is the kicker, is that because I was so exhausted and I was so starving, my ability to handle pain was like super, super low. I couldn't handle it. Like I don't think it's so much that, it's that my body wasn't getting rest in between contractions. Like normally, from what I'm told, you have a contraction and then you have, you know, some time in between to kind of rest and breathe, and I didn't have that because of the shakes, because of the nausea. So 7 hours of just non-stop my body just being a wreck. My plan was not to get an epidural. I wanted to do an unmedicated and vaginal labor, but I also, like we were saying at the beginning, it was just like a wish list. If I needed to deviate from that plan, I'm personally totally okay with that. I told Luca when they checked me at like 9 or 10 in the morning, if I'm not at least 7 centimeters dilated after all of this, I'm getting an epidural. How dilated was I?
4.
I was still 4 centimeters. At least 5, I would have been like, okay, there's progress. 6, great. 4. I was still at 4 centimeters.
After 7 hours.
After 7 hours of nausea, of exhaustion, and all the contractions, I told him, I was like, you know, I know that the reason why I'm not dilating is because I'm so exhausted, I'm so starving, my body cannot relax. It can't handle the contractions and the pain because literally just how exhausted I was. My ability to handle the pain was just so non-existent. I even looked at my doula and I was like, I'm sorry, like I'm gonna get the epidural. And she was so sweet, she was so amazing. She was like, do not tell me sorry for anything. I did feel for like a split second like, oh, like I'm already deviating from my birth plan, but it's what needed to happen. Yeah. It took about 30 minutes for the anesthesiologist to like get down there, and I remember several times being like, where are they? So they administered the epidural. It was amazing. Oh my gosh, you guys, like I literally went from like being in agonizing pain 24/7 because I wasn't resting between contractions to we put on music. It was a Michael Bublé playlist and I was singing along to the songs in between contractions.
It was like a nice change of pace.
It was, yeah, like it was just night and day, and it was amazing. I didn't feel anything. Like I could almost like kind of feel like a little bit, and I would say like, am I having a contraction? And they would look at the computer, they would be like, yep. And I'd be like, I don't feel a thing. It was great, okay? The problem is that I forgot to tell them that I have a high tolerance to anesthesia. I have woken up under anesthesia before. So it started wearing off after about 1 hour. So they had to call the anesthesiologist back in, and they were like, what's going on? Like, you feel it again? And they even give you like a clicker to like administer like a small maintenance dose. And I had been doing that the entire time, and I was like, yeah, it's not doing anything for me. And they were like, okay, I'm gonna like wipe something like a alcohol pad, you said? Yes. I said the other day to Luca, I was like, they licked my arm. And he was like, no, it was an alcohol pad. So they wiped an alcohol pad on my arm. They're like, you feel that? And I was like, yes, obviously, you know, anesthesia, the epidural was for the waist down. So I was like, yes, I feel it here. They wiped it on one leg, and I was like, no, I don't really feel it there. On the other leg, I was like, yep, I feel it. So it was definitely on one side of my body that it was wearing off more. Another 30 minutes, I had to wait for them to prepare everything, and they re-administered the epidural. So we were back in business, and I was back relaxing,
and at this point,
singing.
They check you again.
So at this point, they checked me again.
And now, about an hour after the epidural.
I went from 4 to 6 centimeters in like an hour because of the epidural. And when they told me that, I was like, I knew it. Like I knew that my body just needed to be able to relax, and it wasn't doing that, you know, without the epidural. But then the anesthesia wore off again. That happened 3 times, you guys. Pretty much every hour the anesthesia would wear off. So I was going kind of in and out of bouts of agonizing pain to euphoria of like not being able to feel anything. So that was not fun, you know, just like
back and forth.
It was back and forth, and it just kind of was putting me back in that like I couldn't relax, and I was like tensing up, still starving, still hadn't eaten anything all day, still on only 2 hours of sleep. So pretty much the anesthesiologist came back 3 times. Each time it took them 30 minutes to, you know, kind of make their way down because they have other things that they're doing to other patients. I would say after about like 3 more hours.
3 to 4.
3 to 4 more hours, they checked me, and the nurse was like, okay, I don't want to get your hopes up, but I think you're at 9 centimeters. And I was like, no way. Like, so she called the doctor in. The doctor came in, and they're like, you're 10, you're ready. I could not believe it. It was good news. It was like mid-afternoon by this point, and we had been there since 3 in the morning. They told me that because I'm a first-time mom, they wanted me to call, what did they call it?
They called it labor down. So let you like fully dilated for about an hour, so the baby could descend a little bit more into the birth canal. So pretty much not do anything for an hour. Once I got to 10 centimeters, and the goal was to maximize me like dilating and effacing and all that, and to minimize tearing. Because that's the thing. So after about an hour, they said, okay, you're ready to push.
So I started pushing, and I had the epidural, and it even wore off during pushing, guys. So that was one of the times that they had to come back and top me up.
At this point, it's about 4 p.m. in the afternoon.
Yeah, more or less.
So it's about like 14 hours after, more or less. More or less.
So I started pushing, and at this point, what they're looking at is the station of the baby, and that's pretty much like how much they've descended into the birth canal and into the pelvis, right?
Yeah.
And so the stages, I guess you could say, is -2, and it goes down to -1 and 0, and then +1, +2, and that's like the baby is coming out, okay? So I started at -2, and within an hour, I was at 0. So she was dropping, you know, things were happening, I was making progress, and then after another hour, I was still at 0. And the doctor came in and was like, it's been an hour that you're pushing and she's still at 0. You have 1 more hour, pretty much.
It's been 2 hours at this point.
Oh, it had been 2 hours.
It had been 2 hours,
yeah.
Pushing, right?
And but 1 hour that she was stuck at 0.
Right.
And she's like, okay. The nurse said, well, what it looks like is happening is that you are pushing, and she's going 1 step forward but 1 step back. And from our birth classes, we knew that like that's kind of normal, that like forward and backwards kind of progress, but it's usually 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So you're slowly making progress. And she was like, I see her she's kind of like rocking, just going back and forth when you're pushing. So it's just like 1 step forward, 1 step back. So
yeah,
therefore we were stuck. And they realized that she was stuck behind my pubic bone. So because of the anatomy of my pelvis, she was not able to drop lower. I mean, I don't know, I questioned how much of it had to do with me having an epidural or just the entire situation, me not relaxing. They said, you know, you have 1 more hour to push, and if she doesn't drop any further, we need to look at doing a C-section, because there's no reason why in an hour she wouldn't descend more. So I pushed for another hour, and at this point I knew,
position.
Oh my gosh, we did
million times,
so many
much.
positions. Even though I couldn't feel my legs, I was like, I'm gonna try to squat, like I'm gonna try to do hands and knees, like I did, yeah. It was really hard. I couldn't feel anything, but you know, I could get emotional thinking about it, because I remember thinking like, this is it. Like I have an hour, otherwise I have to do a C-section. And after 50 minutes of pushing, I said, okay, where are we at? And they were like, we have 10 minutes left and she's still at 0. And I said, I'm done. Like,
at this point also, it's important to say that both the vitals of baby and mom were perfect, so there was never fetal distress. They were both always like completely fine.
So it wasn't, I don't like calling it an emergency C-section, because I feel like that implies that there was something wrong. But it was unplanned, is what, you know, they call it. Obviously, we didn't plan for it. For me, it was like, I need a sec. For me, it was like, I really did not want a C-section, honestly, because of the recovery. I had heard, you know, about how hard the recovery was. But at that point in time, I was like, if she's not descending, she's not in fetal distress, everything's okay with me right now. But if I keep delaying and she's stuck in the birth canal, I don't want to get there. I don't want to get to a point where she is in fetal distress and to risk something just because I don't want to have a more difficult recovery. Her safety was the #1 priority. So like, screw a birth plan, you know, like I want her to get here, get out safely, obviously for me too. So I said, okay, no more delays. Like, let's do the C-section. Let's get her out. They gave me more anesthesia and all the medication for the C-section. And the shakes, you guys, the shakes were so bad by this point. And I said, I was literally, like this? Like, seriously.
Even more than that, honestly. It was very, very intense. Only
my upper body at this point for like the C-section, or no, even for the epidural part too, because I could feel.
It was only your upper body.
And I asked them, I was like, are you guys gonna give me something for the shakes? And they were like, nope, your lower body won't move, so that's all that matters. And I was like, okay, great. I was clenching my jaw so tight because it was the only part of my body I could control. I couldn't control the shakes. I couldn't feel my lower body. And I thought to myself, like, my jaw is gonna be so wrecked and sore tomorrow. It wasn't, surprisingly, but at that point in time I thought it would be. They prepped me for the C-section. Luca was there as well. I could hear in his voice that he was so upset.
I'm actually shocked that you could remember hearing my voice.
I could hear.
I was crying.
I could hear. He was crying. Yeah, like just not upset that I had to do a C-section, but just the fact that I was going through surgery in front of his eyes. I tried to not acknowledge it though because I was freaking laying on the table being cut open, so I just kind of put it out of my head. The nurses were checking on Luca to be sure he was okay during the procedure and afterwards. So they did the C-section. Apparently, they even had trouble. Oh, she's waking up.
We're talking about you.
Oh.
You just woke up.
Hi, honey. Let's see how long she lets us continue to talk. During the C-section, they even had a hard time getting her out. They said that she was so like stuck in my birth canal and like around like in my pelvis or whatever, and that my pelvic floor muscles were too tight and like too strong and like sucked her in there, and they had to make my incision even a little bit bigger in order to get her out. I feel like the C-section really was the right decision to make because clearly anatomically and like muscle wise, you know, things just like were not allowing her to descend and to, you know, for me to give birth vaginally. So that is it. I have, as much as it did not go according to plan, I have no regrets about how the birth went. I would say the only thing that like I would change is if I went through 15 hours of labor only to have a C-section. I wish we just would have planned a C-section from the beginning, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. We had no idea that this is the way it would have gone. The recovery has been horrible. Like, not gonna sugarcoat it at all. I can definitely share more on that later if you guys would like. I need to feed her since she just woke up. And there's still lots more pregnancy content to come that I haven't shared. So like a what I eat in a day, my favorite workout clothes, and more. So stay tuned for that. And we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.